to the one who came to a friend's house to visit him. The Duke considered Fry too impudent and arrogant a boy, but his words about the reason for visiting their palace hurt him. The conversation began with the Duke explaining to him that on the continent, only a small part of the power belongs to the empires, but he also said that he could not tell everything to someone he did not fully trust. However, then the conversation turned to the topic that caused Lucas' hands to shake in Frey's body, and Shepard said that there is a true ruler of this continent. Who is a demigod? While the Duke was telling strange theories about demigods, Fry sat with a strange face from the realization that 4,000 years ago, only 5 people fought against a demigod. Fry began to smile, causing Pierre's father to ask him why he reacted so strangely, realizing that now he was not alone, and the fight would be relatively even-sided. Shepard guessed that Fry knew something about the demigod and asked him about it, to which he learned that Fry found Shuai's note when he took the earrings, and the Duke screamed in shock, but immediately calmed down. Pierre's father continued to say that no one knows how many demigods there really are, but they know that each of them is capable of wiping out humanity from the face of the earth with just a whim. Shepard began to talk about how there had been several attempts in the past, and said that 5 heroes who are still known to everyone fought against the demigod 4,000 years ago. He said that all 5 of them fought together, but as soon as Luca Traummen disappeared, conflicts began between them and only Shuai remained, and that was the end of it. Shepard continued that now there were followers of these 5 heroes, but 3 circles had become influential, except for Cassian and Traummen, and Fry was hurt that the circle of his name was so weak. They got up from the table, and the Duke began to pour some expensive wine for the 2 of them. But the conversation turned to the fact that the main mistrust of Fry came from the earrings, Lucas' heirloom. Shepard ended his story by saying that he still couldn't fully trust Fry, because he said that he found the earrings in the mountains of Spain, from where few people returned alive. Fry told him that he accidentally ended up in Shuai's dungeon, but could not tell him where it was, and Pierre's father dropped his jaw at this information. Shepard asked for the type-on earrings, and Fry agreed, poured mana into them, and restrained the minimum amount of power from the artifact. Evening came, after which Fry went to the ball, where he stands in splendid solitude, thinking about what he learned from the Duke. Thinking about the mountain of troubles that has fallen on his head, Fry notices Isabel walking towards him, and she asks him about her dress. Fry was looking at Isabel, who was starting to get angry at him after the strange things he said about her dress, and suddenly his mind shifts during the end of his conversation with Shepard. Shepard said that someone had come into contact with the demigod, to which Fry breaks down and screams about who it was, and receives in response the name of his father, Isaac Blake. The central scene shifts again to a banquet, where one strange man named Gupsa is talking to the son of the Tia city family. Gupsa finished the conversation with this man and looked around, but suddenly one person made him squint, and this man was Fry, next of whom stood the beautiful Isabel. Fry is talking about something with Isabel, but they are interrupted by Sonia Awkward, who arrived at this banquet, and Fry immediately tells her that her dress suits Sonia very well, and then Isabel went mad. Fry notices that Dormis is blushing and looks like she wants to say something, so he offers her a drink, completely unaware of her feelings for him, and Isabel watches all this with a grin. However, their sweet conversation did not last long. A strange man called Fry from the side, saying that he never expected to see him here. This man was Gupsa, who tells Fry that he does not deserve to be at the banquet, because this is a battlefield for the capital's nobility. Fry interrupted his speech, thinking that he was a common bully, and told him to disappear. But Gupsa replied that Fry was completely crazy and forgot his place, enrolling in West Road Academy thanks to his family. Gupsa sees that something is wrong, because around Fry there are 2 dazzlingly beautiful girls who have no equal at this ball. Gupsa is interrupted by 3 young guys from the Tia city family, one of whom introduced himself as Patrick and greeted Sonia, who stood closest to him, and Gupsa said that she was Pierre's fiancée. Sonia became embarrassed and told Fry that not everything had been decided about the wedding. But then Gupsa told her that Fry Blake was the guy to whom someone like Sonia shouldn't even answer. Then Patrick realizes that it is Fry Blake and tells him that he must disappear from the banquet, which is why Isabel gets angry and starts screaming that people like them are not worthy of even Fry's toes. However, when Patrick finished his fiery speech about Fry's uselessness for his family, he said that whoever invited him to the banquet must be a fool, but suddenly Pierre June appears behind him, Pierre June announces that it was he who invited Fry, and also said that Fry is the most honorable invited guest at this banquet, whom Pierre wanted to see, so Patrick and Gupsa bit their tongues. After Pierre's own words, Patrick hesitated and began to beg for forgiveness, because this was a banquet named after Pierre, and he allowed himself such insolence. Pierre began to tell Gupsa that if not for these two factors, then he and Patrick would already be dead, because Pierre cannot allow thugs to insult his precious guests right to his face. After his words, Patrick and his people and Gupsa run away from the banquet, and Fry tells Pierre that he has a very scary character, to which he mockingly replies that it's time for him to look in the mirror. Having finished making fun of each other, they began to sample alcohol, starting a conversation about what the topic of conversation with his father was when Pierre and the others left the dining room. Fry began to remember what Shepard told him after the information about the demigod, and realized that Heinz actually hated Fry because he agreed to his exile. After finishing remembering that Shepard told him that Frey's wounds could not be healed, he told Pierre that he would not return to the academy, causing shock and surprise to the girl Isabel. Isabel stood there in a daze, realizing that now she would have nowhere to go if Fry did not return to the academy, and suddenly she was leaving the banquet alone. Fry continued to talk about how there were many more opportunities in the third tower, even when Isabel, all pale, left the banquet, leaving Sonia alone. Isabel walked through the palace when the lights had already been turned off, and thought about what she should do now and what she really wants to achieve. Suddenly she heard Fry and Pierre having a conversation in the room, and Fry told him that Pierre was actually gifted, even a genius. Pierre continued to lay out all the facts, talking about himself, and said that he wanted to open up to Fry for the first time in his life. In fact, he was cursed by his talent. After Pierre spoke about his cursed talent, he continued to tell the story, starting with the fact that as a child he had a magic teacher. His teacher was a magician of 6 stars, the owner of the 5th tower, and just an old man with a long beard. He was a real guide in his life and magical science. However, everything lasted like this only until Pierre reached the 4th star and asked the teacher a question that he could not answer, and he was completely horrified, shouting that Pierre was a monster. At that moment, the teacher felt envy of the young guy, and Pierre was completely confused in himself, because he did not know what to do. Pierre said that he would prefer to be ordinary, because then he would not be called a monster. Pierre spoke and cried at the same time, and Fry stood up and approached him, but instead of the expected words of consolation, he told him that this little one overestimates himself. Fry explained to him that, in fact, even such a talent as Pierre's would not be enough to comprehend the true essence of magic, because this would require more than just talent. Fry swore that the next time they met with the already calmed Pierre, he would be several times stronger, and suddenly Fry spoke about the demigod. Humanity itself is on the heels of the demigod, a being who changed the rules and laws of this world, and this is both the weakness and the opportunity of humanity to change these foundations. Fry tells Pierre that if he still wants to pretend to be a genius, he can continue to live the same way, but he will achieve nothing. Pierre tells Fry that, after all, a guide is not always a teacher, but Fry answers Pierre that he will always be one step ahead, nostalgically remembering how he stood back to back with Shuhai. Pierre promises Fry that, the next time they meet, he will stand in front of him face to face, and Fry agrees, and while Isabel listened to their conversation, she began to cry when she realized for herself how she should live further. The next morning, as Fry is about to set off, Isabel calls him from behind, asking if he forgot his ballast, and Fry smilingly replies that he does not and never had any ballast. Fry tells her that she shouldn't leave the academy, but she replies that the most powerful magician in the world is standing in front of her, and how could there be a better teacher than him? Fry reminds her that the path with him will be very difficult, but she only replies that she will not repeat herself, because whatever the path she will go through it to the end, and they leave together on a new journey. The morning after the banquet, the escaped Patrick came to Michel with the news that his brother, Fry, had become close to Pierre June. Michel listened to Patrick and told him to get out of here, after which he thought about his words and asked Heinz's opinion about the rapprochement between Fry and Pierre, but he was not interested in this news. Michel told him that he had expected such words from him, but he thought to himself that an opportunity had arisen for them to take advantage of something again, and he left his office, leaving Heinz alone to look out the window. Meanwhile, Fry and Isabel arrived in the city, and along the way, Isabel examined the strange badge that Shepard had given Fry as a qualification for the circle's entrance exam. Isabel said that this was the first time she had heard about the demigod, and she had never even heard that in fact, 5 heroes 4,000 years ago fought not just for justice. Fry began a tirade about how in the current state of humanity, a humanity is a simple slave who is happy due to its achievements, and Fry is going to change the state of affairs. Fry also reminded her that he had not yet lost to the demigod, and they came to a huge magical head. Fry said that he would spend 6 months here, because he would only be able to join the circle after this time. While Isabel could not find the end of the tower, Fry suddenly remembers how in early childhood he came to the magic tower along with Shuai and Fiskspan and began to study magic. While they were standing in front of the tower, the dark elves came up behind them, and when Fry noticed them, he couldn't help but open his mouth in surprise. One of the dark elves noticed that they were being stared at, and Fry and Isabel entered the tower, in which everyone was engaged in martial arts and practicing magical attacks, as if they were a single organism. Kasajan's battle training, she could already maintain a balance between the forces, and she finished. Isabel turned around and saw Fry. One of the magicians approached her, saying that her friend Fry was behaving strangely, dancing all day on the battlefield of the tower, and then sitting in the library all night. Isabel had perfected her technique, and could now see the streams of energy emanating from Fry, and realized that he was actually moving too fast, striking with great force. Liam's son fought next to them, defeating another enemy, but suddenly he noticed Fry nearby, who was trying to hone his martial arts, and approached him. Liam's son realized that he was a battle mage and asked Fry this, but he replied that he was an ordinary one, and the dark elf decided that they needed to find out and offer to fight, surprising Isabel. While Liam's son suggested sparing to Fry, his teacher Camilla said that she was looking forward to working with Fry and began to scold Liam's son for his irresponsibility in Elvish. Camilla told him that wars are not so stupidly imposed. But suddenly Fry also began to speak Elvish, saying that he did not care about the circumstances and would be glad of any battle, surprising her and Liam's son. Liam's son told him that he was starting to like Fry more and more because he spoke like an elf, and they both began sparring with fighting stances of their respective styles. Fry knows about the dark elf's fighting style, and when the fight begins, Liam's son lunges for a jumping kick, but Fry blocks his kick, surprising everyone around him. The dark elf's technique is a shadow silent step, and Fry remembers that the key to this movement is their foot, so he begins to fight, blocking his every blow and attack. After the next block, Fry is about to counterattack, but Liam's son manages to notice this and jumps back several times. Their fight resumes with even greater force. The dark elves from Liam's son's group were shocked that the blows of an unfamiliar warrior named Fry were equal in strength to the blows of Liam's son, who was the strongest of their group. Camilla watched their fierce sparring from the other side, but suddenly realizes that with each blow, the mana in his body is distributed evenly, strengthening his every movement. When she realized this, she asked for the fight to stop, and Liam's son said that Fry's movements were flawless, to which he responded as well. Fry said that, most likely Liam's son was not used to fighting with his bare hands, so if he had a weapon, Fry would have lost, and with these words he not only surprised Liam's son. Camilla took Liam's son away and approached Fry herself, saying that she was surprised by his skill, but fell silent when she saw the taipan earrings on Fry, which caused him to misunderstand. Camilla asked him why he was in the tower, and Fry said that he needed to finish one elixir, about which he was trying to find information in the library of the third tower. She said that Fry could read magical grimoires on this topic, but to read such literature she must pass a qualification exam and receive approval from the 3-floor guardians. Fry finds out how he can pass this test and when it will begin, and understands that the exam will take place tomorrow in the third magic tower. The next day, a line of people who wanted to take the test crowded in front of the library, and everyone was discussing Fry, calling him a strange dancer. Suddenly Fry and Isabel were kicked by Camilla and Liam's son. They also came to the exam, saying that it would be interesting what would happen if Fry was present. 3 examiners came out onto the balcony on the 3rd floor, and Camilla said that the most influential was the one who stood in the middle, Mikkel. Entering the stage, Mikkel started talking about how he didn't want to wait too long, so he immediately began the first exam, which was to create an energy ball. The second task was to concentrate the ball, and in order to go further, you need to make it smaller than the bead. Mikkel passed by everyone, but stopped at Isabel, who did what was required, and let her pass, but stopped in front of the elves, saying that they did not have to take the exams further. But suddenly Mikkel heard that one of the test takers refused to take the exam, but when he looked for himself, he could not believe his eyes, because Fry had concentrated the mana so that it was not visible. Mikkel asked Fry what his name was and what family he was from, and said that his results were incredible, and they needed to talk in his room, the room of the chief guardian of the 3rd floor of the magic tower. Walking into his room, Mikkel asked Fry if he had reached 5 stars, and he did not deny, adding that he came to the 3rd tower thanks to the direction of Duke Shepherd, and Mikkel asked him about the demigod. Mikkel said that traces of the demigod were found in Yushiano, or rather his apostles, those who can use divine power. Fry listened to him, but still did not understand why he was called to him, and Mikkel explained that he needed help accompanying the investigation about the apostles, to which Fry instantly agreed. Mikkel showed Fry his hand, on which was the relic of Iris, the Elmet circle, and explained that after the murder of Lucas Traummen, the opponents of the circle became even more aggressive. After finishing explaining about the reinforcements in the form of dark elves, Mikkel mentioned that he could not help but notice the taipan earrings in Fry's ears. While Fry was thinking, Mikkel said that it would take a week to prepare for the campaign, and in just a week Fry needed to stabilize the energy received from the icy river. Meanwhile, Mikkel asked Fry why he took the exam with such strength, and he learned that Fry needed to prepare an elixir, and Mikkel advised him of an alchemist he knew at the academy. Fry came to the place indicated by Mikkel, and met a strange young girl there, so he did not immediately realize that this was the brilliant alchemist of the academy, Professor Adelia. Adelia realized that Fry is the one Mikkel told her about and lets him into the office, but immediately tells him that he must convey to her the essence of his problem in 5 words, and Fry responds with the creation of liquid mana. Adelia replies that Fry is quite cocky for a guy his age, but when she saw the bottle of concentrated mana mixture that Fry gave her, she couldn't help but scream in surprise. Fry told her that this is the blood of Torquata's heart, the estimated mana of which is 100 zalozend, which made Adelia's eyes run wide. Fry asks her for details, and Adelia says that the difficulty lies in the ingredients, because she needs a phoenix feather, but Fry immediately puts the feather on the table, which makes her even more surprised. Adelia tells him that she has never seen this kind of material in person, but she cuts short, saying that she lacks an assistant, and Fry immediately began to show her his skills and magic. Adelia and Fry began preparations, working together, and then Adelia remembers that she had never heard his name, but Fry remains silent, and Adelia decides to make him her assistant. Fry refuses her offer, but she grabs onto him and starts screaming, but Fry stands his ground and unhooks himself from her. Adelia notices that Fry calls her a professor and learns that Fry is actually a student at the academy, but Fry mentions that he has already left there, ending all the professor's plans and hopes. Fry asks her if Adelia understands golems and their creation, but when asked whether it is possible to create a golem from a core with more than 1,000,000 mana energy, he receives a categorical refusal. Adelia explains to him that without a body made of orochalcum, and without a nervous system embroidered from mithril, such a golem cannot exist and will not be controllable. Fry realizes that the task that Shuhai left him after his death turned out to be much more difficult, and Adelia asks him if he might have such a core, to which he, putting on a smile, says that he does not. In the end, while the preparation of the elixir continued as usual, Fry and Liam's son continued their training sparring, which made all the dark elves respect Fry. Fry finished sparring with Liam's son, and they heard shouts of praise from the elves, who thanked Isabel for her magic lessons. Isabel noticed Fry, who had also finished his training, and approached him, asking when the elixir would be prepared, and Fry replied that it was completed tonight. Camilla told the two that she was very grateful for their help, and in return offered to teach them spiritual magic by binding herself to a close spirit, since this technique is known only to dark elves. Some time later, Fry came to Professor Adelia for the elixir they were preparing, and she said that it was absolutely ready. Adelia told him that he could die from bones burned from the inside, because the concentration of mana was twice as high, but Fry grinned, snatching the precious elixir from her hands. Professor Adelia told Fry that if he drank it without preparing, he would be burned to the bone from the high concentration of mana. Fry called her over because he wanted to thank her for the elixir and gave her the necklace. But Adelia took this as a sign of a romantic proposal, blushing, and ran away from him. She pushed him away with her hand when he just stood there, and tried to explain that this necklace would help improve concentration while working, but she didn't listen and screamed about a forbidden relationship. Torquata's hard blood. He finished scattering the ice crystals when the temperature in the room dropped greatly. Then he sat down in the middle of the room and took out an elixir, which he immediately swallowed in one gulp. At the same time, Isabel and Camila were talking about him, and Camila asked what the power of the 7 Stars magician really was, because she had not fully studied human magic and could not accurately understand it. Isabel answered her that the title of Archmage is given only to great people, and in any state the Archmage will be guaranteed the title of Count, and his name will be written on the stone tablets of the imperial palace. Camilla was a little surprised by such privileges and asked if Fry had reached such a level, but Isabel shook her head and said that now he was only at the entrance to this great power. Fry absorbed the elixir and felt a huge amount of energy, while Isabel told Camilla that Fry was doing this to reclaim the world from the hands of the demigod. The next day, a week of preparation passes and the group, led by Mikkel and Fry, moves to the city of Hallbridge, in which traces of the apostles were seen, and Isabel felt an ominous energy. Fry also felt this strange energy that he had not felt for so long, and realized that it was divine energy, causing his jaw to unconsciously clench. The whole team walked through the streets of an empty small town, and everyone discussed its history, but Mikkel asked Fry if it was normal to take Isabel with him on such a dangerous mission. Mikkel mentioned that Isabel had not said a word since they left, but Fry just shook his head, saying that she had a role to play in this campaign, and suddenly Isabel told everyone that there was someone ahead. The people our group saw ahead exclaimed in surprise, because for the first time in their town magicians from the tower appeared, and one of them introduced himself as Alador, the mayor of this place. Mikkel greeted the mayor and asked if anything strange had happened lately, but the only response he received was that everyone in the city was busy with routine business, and Fry joined the conversation. The mayor did not answer immediately, hesitating for a moment, and said that everyone was busy with business in the forest. But Fry caught him in his mistake, because he had just said that now everyone was busy with routine matters. Fry did not bother with him, and asked Liam's son to run around and find out the situation in the city, and he immediately obeyed him, surprising Mikkel with such obedience towards a person. Liam's son managed to jump onto the roofs of the tallest buildings in the town in a few seconds, and returned with the words that he had not found anyone, and that everything around the city was covered in blood. After Liam's son's words, Alador and his men opened their eyes in surprise and turned into strange humanoid creatures, increasing in size and strength, and began to attack our group. Alador, in his strange guise, jumped on Mikkel, but Isabel rushed to his aid, creating a quick fire wall spell that hit 2 creatures, but failed to hit one of them. The 2 surviving monsters were about to attack the 2 defenseless ones, but then Fry arrived in time, cutting the first one into pieces. After Liam's son finished off the penultimate of the monsters, Fry pinned the remaining one to the ground with his foot, and began to interrogate him, but Camila approached, saying that this matter could be left to her. Camila told them that this would be a good opportunity to see Dark Elf's spiritual magic in action, and began to chant a long elven spell. As soon as she finished, a strange spirit in the form of a flying eye appeared, which she called the Dark Goron, a spirit that is best at stealing information from a victim, and it attacked the monster. The Dark Goron penetrated the monster's head, after which Camila sat down opposite the now obedient mayor, asking where all the people in the city had gone. The monster said that all the inhabitants were dead, because they were brutally killed as victims of an offering that was carried out in order to create the creation of the demigod and release the power of the apostle. However, Camila continued to sit opposite the monster and listen to him, but he suddenly fell silent and his eyes glowed with fiery mana, after which she stood up and screamed. But at that moment there was a huge explosion. The explosion continued to spread, and fortunately the group was helped by Frey's earrings, which created a barrier, and Mikkel said that this spell was cast by the apostle, so they urgently need to return. The explosion ended, and the area became visible again, but Mikkel began to say that they could not cope with the apostle without Anna-Luix, the magician of the 7 stars, and they should wait for his return in the city. Frey told him that he would take his place, but Mikkel told him that only the magicians of the 7 stars can use the fusion of incompatible phases. When two opposing forces unite, Frey told him that this was not arrogance, and began to create two huge forces of fire and ice, which contradict each other at their core, causing Mikkel's displeasure, but Frey began to combine these forces. Mikkel asked Frey if he had really reached the 7th star, since he was able to combine two huge forces, like an experienced high-class magician, and he again only answered him that he could replace Anna. Late at night, the group examined the city, and Camilla told Frey that she had found a not completely burned corpse, which seemed to have been struck by lightning at death. Mikkel explained that one day, after winning a battle with the apostle, his demigod disappeared, and Frey was petrified by this information. The group moved to the forest which was nearby, and when they walked through it, there were not even insects left. All the trees in the area were dead, and Camilla asked why do this to nature. They stopped in a place surrounded by dead trees. Isabel leaned her hand against one of them, and said that an elaborate barrier had been erected around this forest. Isabel said that it would take at least a few days to remove the barrier, but Frey sat down in the same place as Isabel and began scanning the barrier. Camilla said that she would watch Frey's back while he was busy. But as soon as Camilla finished speaking, Frey stood up from his seat and announced that he had removed the barrier. Everyone stood behind Frey, and he began to create a storm wind spell, which with its power blew away the entire area surrounding them, clearing their field of vision. Frey finished his spell, and Mikkel was the first to notice that an apostle had appeared ahead of them, but could not help but be surprised that it turned out to be Honor himself, Lux. None of the team could believe their eyes, because Honor was standing in front of them, Lux. But now no longer a magician, but an apostle told them that Mikkel should have waited a little. Mikkel began to resent him that a person like him could not join the forces of the demigods. But Apostle Honor Lux launched a bolt of enormous power at him. The lightning flew straight to the target at great speed, but Frey blocked it, surprising the apostle, and asked why such a person as the head of the honor circle, Lux, began to use the powers of the demigod. The apostle said that he knew his power and realized that before the demigod, any person, regardless of title, rank or power, is just a bug, causing Frey to have an attack of anger. Frey told him that Honor Lux simply chickened out before the enormous power of the demigod, because everyone in his circle knew about it, but continued to fight, and Isabel realized that this was the first time she had seen him so angry. The apostle answered him that he was not afraid, but recognized his strength. But Frey continued that each person in the circle rose from their knees over and over again to protect what they love. Frey finished by saying that this was the nobility of man that Lux refused, but the apostle immediately created a lightning spell, knocking out almost everyone in the group except Frey. Isabel realized that this was the apostle's power, which was on a completely different level, but Frey was confident. But Lux said that he now had more strength than the wizard of the 7 stars. Dark clouds began to accumulate and consume the sky, and Camilla said that this is not human power, this is the real power of a demigod, and Frey told them that this is indeed a piece of his power. Frey began to explain to his group the tactics in which Liam's son is on the front line. He has 3 lives in his hands. Camilla covers from the rear with the help of magic, and Mikkel supports them and tries not to interfere. Frey finished with everyone except Isabel, and walking up to her, he said something that made her very surprised and said that it was deadly, but Frey replied that they did not have time to discuss. Frey summoned to his staff, and together with Liam's son, they charged, beginning to execute their strategy, and Liam's son struck the apostle, but was thrown back by a single movement of his hand. Following Liam's son, Frey burst into the battle, having already prepared a powerful burning earth spell, launching it at the apostle, and Mikkel, who was watching from afar, could not help but admire his skill. The spell hit the target, but Frey did not feel that it had caused any damage, and the apostle burst out of the ground, without a scratch on himself after such a powerful earthquake. Frey came to his senses, and continued to constantly create new spells and launch them at the enemy, limiting his field of vision, but the demigod's shield saved the apostle from any damage. The group saw this and Camilla began to worry, saying that Frey would soon run out of steam, but Isabel said that everything was going according to plan, because Frey told her that he was going to confuse him about the battle's perception. Isabel told them that Frey actually asked to get rid of the storm in the sky, which gives the apostle the power of a demigod, by collecting a huge amount of mana along with Camilla and Mikkel. Frey continued to throw pointless attacks at the apostle, and Lux began to wonder about the strength of this kid, But then he realized that Frey was not actually trying to damage him. He realized that Frey was trying to limit his view to allow the group to prepare mana for something larger, and he immediately launched a huge lightning bolt at them, to which Frey had no time to react. The lightning hit the target, hitting the magicians and Frey's group, and the apostle was about to finish them off until Frey had time to block his second attack. But Liam's son managed to stop him with his spear. Liam's son cannot withstand the pressure of the enormous power of the lightning demigod and flies away, and Frey overtakes the group of magicians, but Isabel immediately tells him that the three of them are collecting mana for his plan. At this time, Liam's son attacks on her again, Lux, and the apostle grabs Liam's son by the neck, but he reaches the spear with his foot, and at the decisive moment delivers a cutting blow to the body. The apostle received a cut on his torso and was about to finish off the wounded dark elf, but suddenly he felt that Frey began to create a powerful spell. Frey decided that now was not the time to spare the mana, and he should become an ideal bait, and doubts appeared in the apostle's thoughts. But it was already too late, and the spell was sent straight to him. Frey's spell hit the target, and the lava explosion hit the apostle, leaving behind a huge crater, and Liam's son took this as a victory. But not everything turned out to be so easy. Suddenly an apostle rose from the crater, having lost his barrier. But this is only a trifle compared to the loss of his left hand, because the spell had enormous power, but all of Frey's mana was spent on it. Frey rose from his knees and said that in fact he could fight without mana, and the apostle summoned lightning, preparing to repay Frey for losing the stability of the barrier in his left hand. The apostle launched a small amount of lightning at Frey, but he was able to dodge them without mana thanks to his experience, and went to the rear of the defenseless Lux, striking him in the torso. The apostle felt the difference in their experience, and now he was shaking with fear in the face of the danger in the form of Frey. But after a while the apostle realized his situation. The apostle stopped being afraid of Frey and flew into the air, causing a new wave of lightning thanks to the clouds covering the sky, and said that it was time to get Frey what he deserved, because his mana would not run out. However, his speech, accompanied by a huge amount of lightning around him, was interrupted by Liam's son, who kicked him in the face. The apostle fell to the ground, sandwiched between two opponents, while Isabel, Camilla, and Mikkel continued to accumulate mana for a spell that would dispel this storm in the sky. During this time, Frey and Liam's son are defeated in close combat against the apostle, as both of them ran out of mana, and Luke struck them with lightning, causing hellish pain throughout their bodies. The apostle is already preparing to kill each of them in the most painful way possible, but suddenly a group of magicians finish collecting mana and create a warring storm spell. Everyone on the battlefield froze, and the storm spell hit the storm clouds directly, opening the sky, shining sunlight directly onto the apostle, causing him to experience hellish pain and burn alive, until the very end. Lux begged the demigod for help, but he never received anything in response, and was burned alive in the sunlight. In the end, the apostle turned into a charred body, able only to speak, and Mikkel sat next to him and asked Lux about why he sided with the demigod. Mikkel convinced Frey that he would not need much time, and he asked the apostle if Lux could return to the side of humanity and continue to do good deeds. Instead of agreeing with Mikkel, the apostle grabbed him with both hands and pressed him to him, saying that it was too late for him to return to where he started. The apostle was not going to retreat even after defeat, so he captured Mikkel and exploded, taking him with him to the next world, and no one from the group had time to do anything in such a short moment. Isabel began to cry and ran to the scene of the explosion, where nothing was left, but Frey picked her up and told her that everything had gone wrong in the world. Frey said that this path will be very difficult and long, but everyone must endure, it is the duty of each of them. The next day they returned to the city, and Frey was lying in his bed, looking at the crystal that appeared after the murder of Apostle Lux, and Isabel suddenly entered his room. Isabel told Frey that in fact there were also dark elves in the circle, and this made Frey remember how he learned from Mikkel that he was also a member of Fistspan Amlet. Mikkel told him that there are not enough people in the circle now, but there are also strong people in their circle, such as Alton, who entered into a contract with Barbados, who is the great prince of the demonic world. Frey remembered that in fact all the princes of the demonic world are extremely proud, so the likelihood of concluding a contract with them is zero, having finished thinking about Fistspan Amlet, and that he needs to give the crystal to Professor Adelia. having learned her opinion, and someone knocked on the door. Ironically, it turned out to be Professor Adelia, and she notified Fry that Mr. Julian, the head of this Tower of Magicians, wants to see him and Isabel. They came to his office and he introduced himself as Yalian Montalibur, the head of the third Tower of Magicians, told Fry that he had wanted to meet him for a long time. Yalian is very sorry about what happened to the owner of the floor, Mikkel, but he was confused by the fact that the identity of the apostle was not clarified. Fry told Yalian that Mikkel had a proud end, and Yalian became more serious when he told Fry that he wanted him to continue Mikkel's legacy and become the master of the floor. Fry said that he was not too young for such a title, but Yalian told him that his brother from the Blake family, Michel, became the master of the floor at only 26 years old. However, Fry did not look at all the advantages of such a title, so he told Julian that he still refused the offer. They leave the office of the head of the tower, and Adelia begins a tirade about how Fry was too stupid to refuse the position of floor guardian and all subsequent privileges. Adelia continued her tirade, and Fry remembered that he wanted to show her something important, and took her to a room where she saw the apostle crystal, which made her eyes pop out of her head. Adelia told him that in this form his crystal was just beautiful garbage, but it could turn out to be a potion that was incomparable in power to the heart of a 1,000-year-old drake. Fry asked her for help in this matter, to which she asked seriously at first, but after a few seconds her face said that this was the most exciting activity. They agreed, and after some time Fry went to a meeting that Camilla had organized, and he saw that she had brought with her 2 people in long cloaks. Fry greeted Camilla, but she approached him with a serious face and said in Elvish that the hooded man with an unpleasant face was Fez Anoin to Jengza from Fists by an Amlet. Fry responded with a question about the second person next to Anoin, but before he could hear Camilla's answer, they were interrupted by Anoin, who told them to speak in human language and called Fry a scoundrel. Anoin brazenly ordered Fry to tell the details of the campaign against the apostle, to which he replied that he wrote everything in the report, but Anoin did not like it. Liamson wanted to intervene, but Fry stopped him and said that he was not part of the Fistspan Circle Amlet, which means that he does not intend to tolerate such treatment from members of this circle. Honor to Jengza continued to insult Fry, but suddenly a hooded man standing next to him grabbed him by the arm and asked him to stop. This man shut up Anoin and approached Fry, removing his hood and forcing him to calm his anger, and greeted his brother. Because this man was Heinz Blake, Frey's second eldest brother, Fry ended their meeting and went to his room with Heinz, who stood by the window and said that Fry had changed a lot, having become friends with Pierre June. Heinz told him that his changes were very noticeable, but still it was not worth starting a quarrel with such a person from Fistspan Amlet as like Anoin, because he occupies too high a position in this clan. Heinz also warned Fry that a man from the Blake clan would soon come to him, and he should be refused, because now the situation in the clan is tense, since Isaka, their father, has come into contact with the demigod. Fry realized that he heard this information from Honor Shepherd, but asked Heinz what he was doing, since he was acting just like an older brother, causing Fry to wonder the reason why he really came. Fry told Lanes that he didn't really consider him a person, and only changed his attitude because Fry had risen a little in status. Heinz was a reason for Fry to be disappointed in himself, but he responded to his words that he sincerely wished that Fry would not study magic and live peacefully. Taking Fry by surprise, Heinz added that Fry should not trust people from the circles too much, and leaves, saying everything he wanted, leaving Fry to think about his words. Heinz leaves and another person from the Blake family, the butler Alexander, comes to Fry, and then Fry realizes that Heinz was right. Alexander, his butler, informed Fry that the head of the Blake family was waiting for him, but at that time, because of his behavior, he thought that Fry remained the same weakling, and nothing had changed in him. Alexander said that the head of the family was expecting him immediately and was about to leave, but Fry told him that he had his own business, so he would visit his father a little later. Fry said that he would visit his father on his own when he was free, and Alexander at first said that this was an order from the head of the family, but then he realized that he could not persuade him and left him. A few days later, he met with Adelia, who gave him 2 bottles, saying that this crystal made her suffer because she had spent several hundred gold. Fry told her that he would reimburse the entire fee and also give her a reward, but the professor replied that she could not charge the student a fee, but would be glad to take him on as an assistant. Fry noticed that the second bottle did not contain a potion at all, and she said that when processing the crystal, it turned out not only a potion, but also a cloud of lightning energy that could not be processed. Fry again came to his room. In front of him stood a bottle of potion, which he drank in one gulp, and a huge amount of concentrated mana again appeared in his body. While distributing the mana, Fry felt a strong wind begin to blow around him, and realized that his abilities had now improved to the point that he could use his entire body as a storehouse for mana. That evening, Fry called Isabel outside, and when she arrived at the indicated place, she was heartbroken by the cuteness of the kitten sitting next to Fry, and he explained that this was his spirit of darkness, Darkman. Isabel thought that she needed to learn the spiritual technique quickly and sat next to Fry, asking what his next goal would be, since he had already completely calmed the energy of the icy river. Fry said that now it was time for them to gradually get ready to leave this place, and Isabel did not argue, because it would be better that way, and asked if Fry was now going to join some kind of circle. That night, Fry went to his home after talking with Isabel, and had already begun to pack his things for their departure. But suddenly there was a knock on the door, and Fry felt a strange, but not hostile energy. Fry also felt the overwhelming emotions of the person behind the door, so he stood up and opened it, seeing a young girl in a strangely familiar cape, and she removed her hood, revealing to him beautiful green hair, telling him that she was Banyan Argento, head of the Traummen circle. Fry invited the head of the circle into his room, calling Isabel, and began the important conversation for which she came here. She said that as soon as she found out about Fry, she immediately rushed after him, and representatives of other circles might soon arrive. Traummen's circle is interested in the strength of the two students who defeated the apostle at such an early age. During the discussion, Fry noticed that she was wearing a cape that he created in Lucas's body 4,000 years ago. But Fry was not more interested in this, and he asked if Master Banyan was a dragon, surprising all the girls at the table. Fry caught her off guard with his question, and in shock Banyan dropped the coffee mug she was holding in her hand. Dragons do not have a vessel for mana, because their heart is a mechanism that allows them to use it from the atmosphere. Fry surprised her by adding that she has a vessel for mana like an ordinary person, but he sees the purest mana inside her. Banyan smiled, saying that she was half dragon, half human, and was born from such a strange connection between two creatures. Fry escorted Banyan out of his room, saying that he would be down to see her soon, and continued his conversation with Isabel. She said she was surprised that Banyan was not shy about talking about the circle's problems, because it was strange for the head, but she was more surprised that Fry himself asked to come to the Traummen circle, to which he replied that there were a lot of interesting things there. Isabel asked him what could interest him, because this happens very rarely, since Fry already knows his path. Fry did not pick up her joke, and said that it was only important for him to gather all his forces in one place to achieve his goal. Hearing his answer, Isabel couldn't help but remember how Shuhai wrote in his diary that Lucas was the center of attraction for everyone. They left the room, and Isabel concluded that a truly great man does not change his words. They went down to Banyan, but saw in front of them a rather strange scene between her and the head of another circle, which they could not expect. Tajinxer stopped shouting at the girl when he saw Fry, and two more men came out in front of him, wanting to talk. The one higher was Jerome Bernard from Rashida Sat, and the second was Stephen Jayak from Straw Nichols. Fry realized that they had also come to him, and they said that they were a little late, and the head of the circle, Traummen, came first. Tajinxer asked Fry if he was going to join Traummen's circle, and added that they were a perfect match, causing Banyan to clench her fists. The heads of the remaining circles asked Fry to stop by when he had inspected the Traummen circle, to which he politely said that he might do so later. Annoying would like to invite him too, but he answered that they needed to get away from prying eyes in the hall to talk in private. Annoying Tajinxer asked Banyan to stay here, and she only silently agreed, but replied that Fry should be careful. Fry asked Isabel to stay with her and smiled, saying that he would be back soon, because it would not take much time. The two of them leave. It is already deep night outside, and they are in the forest not far from the tower, where there was not a soul. When they stopped, Fry brazenly said that this was not the right place to invite a person like him into the circle. Annoying replied that he did not believe his victory over the apostle, so he decided to conduct a personal exam for Fry to join. After these words, Annoying exploded with mana, creating strange vines from the ground that immediately attacked Fry. Fry remained motionless, but asked him what he would do if he really killed the apostle. Jinxer answered him that even in this case he could handle Fry, because he was not like all the other magicians of the 7 stars. Fry agreed that not all magicians are equally powerful, including himself, and released his mana, confusing Jinxer. Fry did not lift a finger to repel Annoying's attacks and spells, causing him to fear for his life. Annoying did not stop being afraid of him but still began to create a powerful spell that could be dangerous for Fry without suspecting anything. He did not have time to finish the spell because suddenly it simply disappeared, forcing Annoying to think about what this young magician was capable of. Annoying was shocked, because canceling the spell of a high-ranking magician is much more difficult than making a flying blade fall by calculating and then changing the trajectory. Before he could finish his thought, Jinxer felt his body being enveloped from his feet by ice from mana, which he was unable to resist. He was completely immobilized and asked what Fry would do with him after his defeat. Hinting that either death or shame awaited him after this, Fry said that he would not kill him now, but would try to test the will and strength of Jinxer, since he found himself in this position through his own fault. Fry said that if he could change overnight into a new person, by changing his principles and character, then he would survive and break the ice. This angered Jinxer, and he shouted on what grounds someone like Fry dared to check him, a member of an influential circle with extensive connections. However, he ended his screams when he realized that Fry looked like a much larger person than he was, as if he had a second personality. Unlike him, Fry remained unshaken and said that he needs to kill his past self and bury it deep in his heart by becoming someone else, and this is his advice to Annoying. Fry turned around and left after telling him that he sincerely hoped that Annoying would improve after this incident and be able to survive. Banyan and Isabel were already waiting for him at the exit of the forest and asked if everything went well and if Fry was okay. Fry said that everything was fine with him, but Isabel replied that she was most worried not about him, but about the life of Jinxer after talking with Fry. Fry told her that Annoying would not die, because the ice would melt before noon tomorrow anyway, even if he did not surpass himself and could not melt it with his own powers. They set up camp and Banyan made soup from what she had on hand, but said she wasn't sure how it would taste, because she didn't cook in such conditions very often. The 3 of them ate soup, and Isabel said that she could clearly see how Banyan was accustomed to sleeping in the open air when traveling. Fry asked for more, eating the first portion at one point, and asked Banyan about which demigod killed the great ancestor circle Master Osel Argento. The question of which demigod killed her father initially shocked her and made her remember bad moments, but she said that it did not affect her and everything was fine. Isabel screamed at Fry for treating the fragile girl this way, but Banyan began her story, speaking with a sad face. Banyan began to say that the demigods have their own hierarchy, and the one who stands above all is called the Lord, and Fry was very surprised at her knowledge. She continued to say that among the less powerful demigods, there are those who are the strongest, and they are called apocalypse. Banyan said that they studied the 3 demigods Poison, Death and Sword, and her father died from the battle against the Death Apocalypse about 2 years ago. Fry thought about her words and realized that he knew Apocalypse Poison. He was an incredibly strong old man whom he was unlikely to cope with now. They spent the night in a camp in the forest, but the next morning they set out and soon reached the Finesco forest, where members of the Traummen circle live rings. Fry noticed an incredibly strong barrier around the area, and Banyan explained to him that it was created by her father, but she could only repair it if it broke. Fry thought about how the great ancestral master was at least 8-star level, while his daughter was most likely 6-star, all because of her life among humans rather than dragons. Fry thought that it would have been better if she had been born among people, but discarded these thoughts because it was impolite to sympathize with someone else's level of power. They walked through the barrier a few seconds later and saw houses being built all over the place, and Banyan said that as the main area of the circle it didn't look very good. Honor suddenly ran up to them Ghislaine, and tells Banyan that while he could not contact her, they were attacked again. He continued to say that the basilisk tails like hyenas came and took the relic, which made Banyan's eyes suddenly darken. Banyan came to her senses and said that she didn't know what to do, because she brought Fry and Isabel here, but not the most peaceful times had come. The man also greeted Fry. apologizing that he could not prepare everything properly before his arrival, because such a situation had occurred. Banyan accepted this and asked what relic they took this time, and the man replied that they took the red ring, catching Fry by surprise. Fry began to remember that the red ring was one of 7 rings that he made himself 4,000 years ago, but forgot where he put them. But he was brought back to reality when they were approached by 3 suspicious men who told Banyan that they had stopped by to say hello, but she was not home. Banyan introduced him by saying that she had been seeing Lunder Antoine a lot lately, to which he replied that he had come to lighten her load. Lunder said that he would really like to have tea with her, but they had business and left, saying goodbye to the members of the circle, leaving Banyan biting her lip in frustration. Fry asked Ghislain to explain what the fight for the relic meant, and learned that it was a competition with the circle's relic at stake. He said that it was an established tradition, and Fry asked if it could be abandoned, but learned that this would have consequences for the circle Traummen. Fry said that he understood the situation. The Basilisk tails are a group of hyena-like people who are stealing the relics of the weakened Traummen circle. Ghislain said that all the small and medium-sized circles around them have already united, and now they come here in the absence of leadership once a month. Ghislain said that now their strength is less than 1/10 of what it was in better times, so they will soon disappear or be absorbed by other circles. Fry thought about the fact that Banyan invited him here, but still told the whole truth about the circumstances in the Traummen circle, without hiding anything. Isabel brought him back to reality from his thoughts, and they saw a statue of Lucas Traummen in front of them, and Fry walked up to it with a sad look. He stroked his past name with his hand, but suddenly someone behind him asked if he really liked the statue of Mr. Lucas so much. The man who called him introduced himself as Vian, another honor from Traummen's circle, and apologized to Fry for causing him trouble. They introduced themselves to each other, and Fry asked if he could ask a question that is unlikely to be asked when meeting a stranger for the first time. Fry became serious and asked why Vian remains in an almost collapsed circle that is incapable of anything, and not only he, but also the rest of the honors of the clan. With their abilities, they would be welcome in any other circle, but they remained here and scooped water from it with ladles, and Fry could not understand the reason. Isabel said that Fry was straightforward, but Vian appreciated Fry's comparison, saying that in fact everyone in the circle knew about the possibility. It would be better if the participants dispersed, but Vian said that they could not do this, because the circle would be wiped out from the face of the earth. He said that even if it is boring, the basis of the circle is respect for its founder, and none of them wants to lose their roots, their meaning in life. Honor says that in ancient times, magicians were at enmity with each other, killing each other for the sake of empty glory, but soon everything changed. However, Lucas Traummen was different. He believed that anyone associated with magic was a friend to him, and he stuck to this opinion all the time. He created a world in which all magicians are kind to each other, and Vian said that maintaining this order is the main purpose of this circle. Even though they are weak at this time, they will never give up, and will wait for the scattered forces of the Traummen's circle to reunite, returning to greatness. Vian interrupted, saying that he believed Lucas would have done the same, but at the time Fry looked at him with respect, pride and recognition, as did Isabel. Isabel said that he should not apologize for his words because she is sure that Lucas would be proud if he had followers like him. Vian thought for a moment that it was not Fry who stood before him, but the great Archmage Lucas Traummen, who recognized his spirit and fortitude and left it at that. After parting ways with the Fianna, Isabel and Fry go to say goodbye to Banyan and Ghislain, who wonder where the two of them will go now. Ghislain asked about it, and Banyan said that Fry asked her about the location of the Basilisk tails and the rules, which surprised her. They both thought that Fry was more interested in the Basilisk tails than the Traummen circle, so they went along with it, but Banyan was worried. She was worried that Fry asked her if a foreigner could apply to fight for the relic, and then left the Traummen circle. At this time, Lunder Antoine, being at the base of the Basilisk tail, said that they should completely drain the Traummen circle, because their relics had already been captured. Suddenly one of the group approaches him, and says that some tramps have come to him and asked him to fight for the relic, and he asks him to drive them away. Antoine did not expect that these same tramps in the person of Fry and Isabel had already entered their territory, and Fry said that refusal to fight was prohibited by the rules. They shouted how dare he break their barrier, and Fry angered them by saying that he didn't notice any barrier except the insect net. At this time Lander was thinking that Fry was not an ordinary young guy, but a magician of 6 stars, but did not even know about his real power. Lander tells him that if he is going to fight for the relic, then he must have something to put at stake, because these are the rules and Fry must know them. Fry stuck Kungno's dagger in front of him, saying that if he had eyes, he could guess its value for basilisk tails. After what happened, Lander stood up and approached Fry, saying that he now liked him, and Fry asked him to follow him to the place of their battle. They found themselves in a place surrounded in all directions by empty space in a cave, and Fry was asked if he knew the rules of the fight for the relic. It cannot be refused, there is a limit of 3 battles per day, and one does not have to be held responsible for killing. Fry was aware of this. Lander placed the red ring, thinking that now he will take away everything that is hidden in the hidden space from the boy when he accidentally kills him. He underestimated Fry's strength and asked Ellen Fiaxa came out against him, thinking that a warrior magician would easily deal with an ordinary magician, killing him without any problems. Ellen found out that Fry is a magician, so he decided that ignoramuses like him should die young, and he hopes to kill him with one blow, because he is a magician. However, when the fight began, Ellen simply fell to his knees, choking on the strange ice mana, losing consciousness, and losing the fight before it began. Lander realized that this was a secret ice arrow technique, and it required Fry a lot of mana to use, but gave him great power. Fry started to leave, and Lander decided that he had used up almost all his mana on this attack, so he asked him not to leave and fight again. He said that Fry should not leave after one victory, increasing the bet on the fight, thinking that now he would easily win and hit the jackpot by taking all the relics from Fry. Fry grinned and said that nothing could be done, so he put down the dagger and the red ring that he had just won in the first fight. Lander asked Killa to go into battle, saying that they needed to drag out the battle, because Fry would soon run out of mana, and they would win an easy victory. Lander told him to focus all his strength on the protective barrier as soon as the battle began, and Killa added that it would not overcome his difference in experience. He said that victory would be on their side and stood up, after which Fry said that he was tired of waiting for them to discuss their battle strategy. As soon as the fight began, Killa immediately created a barrier, putting all his energy into it at once, and Fry launched the same spell at him. The 2 spells met, and for a second Killa thought he had won, but Fry's attack broke through his barrier at the same moment, hitting him. The spell hit him in the stomach, and he lost consciousness, after which Fry triumphantly said that this was the second time there was only one time left. Lander became angry and decided to go into battle himself, saying that he would be his last opponent, and created a barrier, preparing to attack from the start of the fight. The fight began, and Fry immediately used his spell for the 3rd time in a row, after which Lander decided that now he was definitely out of mana. Lander took Fry's attack, hitting the ice spear with his fist, and smashed it, thinking that now was the end and he could easily finish off the exhausted Fry. He didn't have time to finish his thought when suddenly ice daggers appeared around him, and he only uttered a phrase that this couldn't be. Lander was surprised by this, saying that this was a secret technique, but Fry replied that he did not understand him, because it was the most ordinary ice arrow, a 2nd style level spell. Lander objected that low-level magic could not be that strong, but Fry said that he was too strong, or they were too weak. Lander couldn't believe it, and ordered his group to capture the woman, and Isabel understood nothing while the basilisk tails ran towards her, standing next to Fry. Lander began to say that it was easier to kill both of them and take the relics for himself than to fight honestly, and his magician sent a fire spell at Fry. While everyone could not believe their eyes, Fry came out of the explosion, telling Isabel that if he kills everyone here, does she know what this action will be called in that case? Having finished off the enemies with lightning, she said not to do unnecessary tasks, because in this case it would be called self-defense, and Fry said that she answered correctly. Fry did not understand how such an idiot as Lander became a leader, and he rushes to attack, but suddenly stops after a few steps, feeling a cut on his throat. Lander realized that it was a wind cutter without casting a spell, and Fry asked him to be careful, because he could have just killed him. But after that, suddenly everyone fell to their knees, causing Fry to be surprised, because a woman came, whom everyone from the basilisk's tail, fearing, called Master Felik. Fry knew from her look that she was a master of the basilisk tale, and she said if it was too rude for their first meeting, but could not finish the words. She wanted to speak, but could not, because Fry released the pressure from his enormous power, silencing her, and asked for what purpose this circle was created. All of her subordinates screamed, but she could only kneel and responded that they must protect people from the demigods and their influence. Fry asked who the demigods were, and realized that Philip Obaya knows everything perfectly, while her subordinates shouted at her about stupidity. Since she knew everything perfectly well, Fry asked why she was only concerned with building her own strength, and not with her duty. After this, Fry released a mana of ice, freezing everyone alive around him in a huge radius, and Philip asked him to preserve the circle of the basilisk's tail. Fry says that he will save it if Philip gives his life, and she decides to do this, saying that if he fulfills the conditions, she will gladly do it. Fry prepared to cast the spell, and everyone started screaming, but just before the end he stopped, saying that the master wasn't that bad. Everything calmed down, and Philip remained alive. But suddenly Fry spoke, asking her to bring him everything that they took from the Traummen circle. Philip was recovering from shock, but Fry did not finish there, and asked to tell him about the nearest small and medium circles in their location. Late at night, the head of the Traummen circle was walking outside, and Jaylin said that she might have a cold, but she replied that Fry was worried about her. She was worried if he could reach the basilisk's tail, but Jaylin said that she would meet a better fate than him. Ghislain finished his speech, and suddenly they both heard Fry say that they should not talk about love topics. They thought that Fry had left them forever, but he replied that he would not do that to them without saying anything before he left. Fry said he was just going for a light walk for the rest of the day, and they went to the main building for a discussion, inviting everyone. Sitting at the table, Banyan said that Fry wanted to tell everyone something, and he replied that he was going to wipe out the demigods from the face of the earth. He said that he cannot rely on the circles for this now, because they are all at enmity with each other and restrain each other. Fry said he wanted the Traummen circle to become the center of gravity for all circles, ruling not only the small ones but also the three strongest ones. Banyan said it was unlikely, but Fry slammed his hand on the table, and said all he wanted to hear was whether they were willing to do it. Fry continues, saying that what will follow is hellish pain, incomparable to the current state of affairs, and they will miss this time. But if they are willing to take the risk, then Fry promises to take the Traummen circle to the top of the mountain, after which he places the stolen relics of the circle on the table. Everyone was surprised, and Isabel said that Fry had already subjugated the 6 nearest middle circles, leaving them to Traummen rings. No one could believe that the young guy was able to subjugate all the small and medium clans in the area, but the evidence was in front of them. Fry said that this was not for bribery, but a reward for their efforts, which made Banyan even more surprised, because the relics had always been theirs. Fry said he was giving them a day to think, but Banyan asked him to stop, saying that time was not needed, but asked him to answer the question. She asked if it was really possible, and Fry replied that he would swear everything he had, and would make it happen by putting everything he had on the line. The next morning, Banyan gathered all the members of the circle in the main square, and prepared to announce something important, keeping people guessing about it. Everyone thought that now she would say that the circle was disintegrating, but she introduced everyone to the new launder, the deputy head of the circle, Fry. Fry introduced himself to everyone, and said that many people might not really like the fact that such a kid became a launder of the circle. Fian thought that now Fry would explain everything to the people, but Fry said that in reality none of them had the right to become a launder of the circle. Fry said that there were so few strong people in their circle that a young guy took the role of launder, and they should think about this situation. Fry jumped into the crowd of indignant participants, saying that he would be happy to argue with the dissatisfied, but he would sort things out in battle. Fry grinned and said that if someone could tear his clothes, he would give him the position of launder and the tight pun earrings made by Lucas. The circle leaders wondered why Fry was acting this way, and Ghislain said that the first reason was to test the members' power levels. Everyone was surprised by this reason, but there was a second reason, and Banyan said that he intended to take all the discontent of the circle members on himself. She thought that Fry was worried about those who had to make a difficult choice, but at this time he was only thinking about the battle, saying which of them would be the first. Pio was the first Gunther, a magician, told Fry to change his stance, but Fry was fine with everything and Pio got angry, saying that he would regret it. Pio said that Fry was too arrogant, but launched an attack by creating a fireball and launching it at Fry with all his power. Pio Gunther prepared for another attack, but Fry created the exact same fireball without saying a word and collided it with the opposite one, dispelling both spells. Those around him realized that Fry had at least 6 stars, and Pio could not understand how the young guy created an identical attack in a split second. Everything calmed down and Fry asked Pio Gunther what were the virtues of fire magic, which he specialized in, and answered that it was power. Fry said that his level of concentration is not bad and his efforts are visible. But because of this, the main advantage of fire magic, its power, suffers. Fry explained to him that due to the perfect spherical shape, the magic would not become stronger, so it was better for him to focus on increasing the power. This could only be done through the knowledge of fear, the knowledge of oneself, and Fry finished the story of his glorious friend, the fire magician. Fry explained that fire magic has 2 sides, like good and evil, or positive and negative, and by learning both, Pio can become stronger. Fry said that when he understood the essence of fire, he would be able to imagine in his imagination the right path along which he would walk as a firebender. Pio returned to the crowd happy, and because of this, one of the circle members did not understand why he was so joyful, and decided to check Launder himself. This man came out in front of Fry with a weapon, saying that realizing his weakness does not make him stronger, and now he will prove it impudently. He said that he would show Fry the right path to becoming a strong magician, but at the start of the battle he immediately lost, flying away from a simple earth spell. Fry practiced with the circle members all day, and ended in the evening having won respect in the hearts of each of them. That evening, Fry said at the meeting that in 3 months he would raise the power of the circle to a new level, including Master Banyan and the rest of the honors. Fry informed them that in 3 months he would make a competition between circles nearby, and Traummen would have to show his strength in it. Fian objected that this was impossible, but Fry said that everything would become possible, because he promised to show them what real hell was. The next day, Fry called Banyan to the quiet place where they began their training and asked her to activate her magic. Fry said that she did deliberately create a mana room inside herself, to which Banyan replied that she was told that without it she would not be able to cast magic. Fry explained that dragons can use mana directly from nature, and therefore it is necessary to destroy this mana room. Fry said, "First of all, you need to get rid of the mana inside her." And he poured his mana into her, causing a large wave of energy around her. Banyan fell to her knees, and Fry said that the feeling of heaviness now was a side effect of her creating the mana room. Banyan was shocked by the sensations but remained sitting because Fry said that he would now destroy the room and her mana should not interfere. He poured a large amount of mana into her body, causing her to scream in pain and nearly lose consciousness, and continued spreading the mana. Fry reached the room, but did not expect it to be so dense and stable, so he was not sure whether it would hold. Fry realized that this would take a very long time, and Banyan began to whimper from the pain in her torso, but she remained confident and did not move. After a long time, Fry stopped and Banyan collapsed, asking if he was finished, but he replied that it was today's part. Banyan asked if there would be such training, and Fry said for a whole month, which made her lose face and think that he wanted her dead. Fry responded to her words by promising to show her real hell, and she burst into tears so loudly that she could be heard in all the mountains. That same day, Fry was training with Vian, conducting a practice fight, and Vian tried to hit Fry with all his strength, but could not get through. Vian continued to strike with different parts of the body, but Fry even blocked kicks with one hand. Vian did not give up and decided to throw a hail of blows with his fists, but when he threw them, he felt as if he was hitting a rock. After the last blow, Fry told him to stop, adding that his skills were worse than that of a second-rate magician. Fry realized that he had hurt the pride of the Fianna, so he is confident that he can make it stronger than it is now. Vian had a common fighting technique called the 100 King's Blows, and Fry said it sounded stupid. Fry said that his technique is impeccable, but he is too weak so he cannot determine the weaknesses of his opponents. Vian asked him how he could become stronger, and Fry said that there are no shortcuts. One must take it gradually. Fry said he will have to climb each step, but he will help speed up the process. After these words, Fry began training, and after a while Vian was already lying on the floor, tearfully begging for a break. Vian asked to be killed, but Fry said that he needed to get up and finish the second half of the training, stopping pretending. Having finished with the Fianna, Fry began training with Honor Giseline, and when they had both finished, Fry handed him the dagger. Fry told him to now use it, the dagger of Kungul, an artifact from the Age of Light, in battle. Giseline wanted to argue that the magician did not need a dagger, but Fry said that he understood that he had used the sword in battles for a long time by his calices. Fry said that despite the fact that he now has 5 stars, Giseline will be able to quickly develop thanks to this dagger, and asks to use it and become a swordsman. Giseline said that he would try, but he was not very confident in himself, to which Fry asked not to worry, because he would take care of self-confidence. At the end of the day, when all the training was over, Honor Giseline, exhausted, returned to the building, and saw Fianna lying on the table, looking barely alive. Giseline could not reach the table and fell in front of him, saying that his hands did not move, and Banyan came for him, having heard his words. However, she also had difficulty moving her limbs, saying that Fry had been rummaging through her stomach all day, and she fell exhausted along with them. When they finished speaking languidly, Fry entered the room, saying that they could eat and go to evening training. Fry did not understand why they were all lying down, and asked if they really felt bad, and they unanimously thought that it was his fault. At this time, a man entered the main building, saying that he had returned after completing a mission, but he saw Fry at the entrance and froze. Honor Isaac decided that Fry was an assassin and prepared to attack him, because he was not even armed. Banyan could not stop Honor, because she did not have the strength to say a word, and he struck Fry with his sword, hitting the barrier. Isaac put even more force into the attack, but Fry noticed Professor Adelia behind him and greeted her sweetly. Banyan found strength and explained that Isaac is the one she sent to another place because of the assignment, and he has only returned now. Fry said that the Duke asked him if he belonged to the Traummen Club, and Pierre wondered if he had decided to join.